Purple belt was probably the first time in my jiu-jitsu career where I felt gamey, where I felt genuinely dangerous. And I also think this is really common for other students to feel this at purple belt as well. So in today's video, we are going to talk about this gamey feeling and how it's both a blessing and a curse for you at purple belt. If you're new to the channel, thanks for checking it out. My name is Chasen Hill. I'm a jiu-jitsu black belt who's been teaching and training now for over 16 years. So if you like all things jiu-jitsu, it's probably a pretty good channel for you to subscribe to. That way you never miss the latest video whenever it comes out. Now, purple belt was really the first time I felt like I had certain positions and submissions and transitions that I really felt confident in while I was rolling. And I could mostly smash white belts and blue belts and hold my own against purple belts. And if I had to be honest, I felt pretty confident when I had to go up against the brown belts and the black belts in the room in very specific scenarios. And that feeling was exciting because I had spent years just getting smashed to find any kind of strengths that I had. And I really felt like I had earned that right to use them. But one thing that I didn't really understand about this kind of gamey feeling right away was I wasn't super well-rounded. So just because I was gamey did not mean everything was good under the hood. Gaminess often really worked in my favor when the roll went in the exact way that I wanted. And so the problem is that a round doesn't always go the exact way you want, especially when you're training against more experienced people or better people. So while gaminess really felt good, it quietly became the thing that really slowed my long-term development at purple belt the most. Now, purple belt is a unique rank because it sits right in the middle of the jiu-jitsu journey. You know enough to be effective, but maybe you don't know enough to see all of your blind spots clearly enough. Well, at least that was the case for me. At white belt and blue belt, your weaknesses are a lot more obvious and your coaches are probably constantly pointing them out to you a lot more. But at purple belt, you get a lot more freedom, and that freedom comes with a lot more self-direction. And that's where the problems can start to creep in if you're not careful. So I really began to identify myself with a sort of a game. I had a guard that I really liked. I had top positions I preferred, and I had some favorite submissions I would always go for. And instead of asking what I needed to work on, I would just ask myself, well, how can I get to those places a lot faster? And really the danger with that mindset was I stopped working on my limitations and I really just started to protect my strengths. I wasn't consciously trying to stagnate, but that kind of comfort zone solely replaced my drive to expand and improve my limitations. And before I knew it, my overall growth really had quietly slowed down, even though I felt like at times I was tapping more people than ever. Let me know down in the comments below, where do you feel like your game is the most stagnated currently? Is it in the bottom? Is it in the top? Or is it with a specific move? Now, one of the hardest parts about this belt for me wasn't necessarily the technical aspect. It was more of the emotional side. So at purple belt, really my ego was much more invested in how I was performing on the mat. So I had built this identity around being good or not being the worst person in the room. And I felt like it was really risky to step outside of that mindset. Trying new things meant that I was having to willingly put myself back into uncomfortable situations. And so I didn't want to find myself tapping more or losing positions and sometimes feeling like I was going backwards. So that really wasn't an easy pill for me to swallow when I wanted people to respect my abilities. And I see this in many other purple belts in the exact same way. So they cling tightly to what works and they avoid the positions they appear bad at, and they always steer the rolls toward that familiar territory. And the problem is that growth in jiu-jitsu will often feel like temporary failure. So if you're not willing to feel bad in training, sometimes you're probably not pushing yourself to the ceiling as much as you possibly could. If you want help figuring out where your biggest limitations are, make sure you check out my free jiu-jitsu game plan generator that's down in the description below. It'll walk you through a small assessment about what you already do, and that makes finding your limitations a lot more easier. Now, let me be clear, there is nothing wrong with having strengths in jujitsu. In fact, every upper belt has things that they are known for. The issue that I noticed at purple belt was that I relied on my strengths to really hide my biggest limitations. So against like lower belts, this worked perfectly because they couldn't force me outside of my comfort zone too often. And then against experienced brown and black belts, it worked for a while, but not forever. And I remember rolling with some upper belts where my A game worked for a round or two. And then after a few rounds, they started to shut it down and expose my gaps quite horribly for me. And so no matter how good your favorite techniques are, skilled opponents will eventually find those holes. And at that point, running my A game just made the situation a lot worse. Now, the way that I moved past this stage was to train with a lot more intention. So sometimes I had to choose development over dominance, especially when I was training against those lower belts. So no matter how much I wanted to smash them, I had to resist. I tried to start rounds in my worst positions and to improve my real limitations. I would use white belts and blue belts as learning partners, not just as outlets for my ego. I could safely experiment without getting shut down immediately. So I would think about my training in blocks. So I'd focus on one limitation at a time and then move on to the next one. Now, to clarify, I didn't abandon my strengths or never train them. I would just rather focus on ensuring that my weaknesses didn't limit them. Purple belt isn't about proving that your game works anymore. It's really about discovering where it breaks down and fixing those areas deliberately. The students who make the best brown belts are the ones who keep their eyes on their biggest holes. They are willing to look bad in the short term to get better in the long term. They don't measure success by how many rounds they win in the gym. They measure success by how much more adaptable they've become over time. If you feel like your progress has slowed, this gaminess trap might be the reason for it. The good news is that awareness alone can honestly really change everything. If you start training with a purpose instead of comfort, your ceiling rises very quickly. Purple belt done right really sets the foundation for the most dangerous jujitsu you'll ever develop. Breaking through these stagnation points on your own can be extremely difficult. That's why I created my Jiu-Jitsu Accelerator program. This is not an instructional full of techniques and concepts. It's a personalized coaching system designed to help you figure out your biggest limitations and build a plan to fix them. If you're ready to actually take action, go ahead and click the link down in the description below to fill out your application today. That's going to wrap up the end of this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave this video a like. Also, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Then check out one of these two videos that are going to pop up right here. And I'll see you in the next one.